If everyone could take their seats, we'll begin the Coastal Sharks meeting. All right, great. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everyone to the inaugural meeting of the Coastal Sharks Management Board meeting. I'm Adam Nowalski. I was the vice chair of the Spiny Dogfish Board, and when the board split, I became chair of this board. One of the action items today will be to elect a vice chair. So moving forward, let's begin with a approval of the agenda. Do I have are there any changes or additions to the agenda as written? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. There are no proceedings to review since this board has not formally met before, so that is not an item on our agenda. Moving on, we'll turn to the public for any comment for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll continue moving forward. I guess everyone got a whiff of the lunch next door and figured out the sooner we're done here, the sooner we get to eat. All right, so our next action item will be to set the 2014 Coastal Sharks specifications, and we will turn to a presentation now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our TC chair couldn't make it, so I'll be giving the presentation. This is the Coastal Shark specifications for 2015, and it's a very brief presentation. As you know, the board follows NOAA fisheries for openings and closures as well as quotas. The board may specify a trip limit for the large coastal sharks, small coastal sharks, pelagic, hammerhead, and black-nosed shark groups. And NOAA Fisheries has proposed a rule that suggests that the trip limit may change during the season, when the current trip limit is 36. These are the quotas. Technical difficulties. Hold on one sec.
While they're straightening that out, I did mention lunch. It wasn't officially on the agenda, but when we do get done here, assuming we can get done quickly enough without having to have to break, there will be lunch next door in the same room that we did the luncheon yesterday. Thank you. All set?
Yes, we're all set. So these are the proposed opening dates for the different coastal shark groups. And the TC has reviewed the proposed specifications from NOAA Fisheries, and their only concern with the proposed specifications for 2015 is the continued quota linkage between the black-nosed and the non-black-nosed small coastal sharks, because it continues to hinder shark fishing opportunities. When the black-nose closes, it forces the closure of the small coastals. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions about the presentation? Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think at a previous meeting where we were already started with the 2014 timing of the openings, Lewis Daniel had made a motion for July 1, and that was talked about around the board and pretty much accepted. So I'm wondering, what about the June one we see now?
Lewis?
Yeah, I don't know why it says June 1, because we had all agreed last year July 15th provides us with the access that we need. I know that they had done some work NOAA Fisheries had done some work to try to make there be parity with the southern areas, particularly off of Florida. But if it would be appropriate, I'd like to make a motion that we support a proposed opening date of July 15th to move forward in perpetuity.
Well, we would certainly are going to need a motion moving forward here today. It certainly brings up the issue of the inconsistency with the federal regulations, but it is at the board's discretion how to proceed and whether they want to accept the implications of those inconsistencies. Would there be any discussion that we could hear from the service about such implications? Carolyn?
Carol. So we went with the June 1, which is the same as what we have right now. We opened June 1 this past year. The fishery is still open. It looks like it may continue to be open for the rest of the year. We did receive a comment from this board during the comment period, which closed a couple weeks ago, requesting an opening date of July 1. We are considering that as part of the comment. But just a note that if we do not open till July 1, and this year we remain open until December 31st, then it is possible that next year, with the July 1, you will not fully harvest the quota.
Let me turn to Maureen for a minute for a clarification.
Yeah, Louis, the ability to set multi-year specifications is not in the document. It's on an annual basis, so the in perpetuity part of that, we might want to
No luck?
Rob, I saw you with your hand raised again.
Yeah, I mean, I think July 15th would be wonderful since Virginia's closed up until that date, but I have to say, last time around, I think it was the spring meeting of 2014 when this came up, but I had been talking about July 1, frankly, and certainly I understand the comments that Carol just proposed, but some of the history shows that there's been an exclusion in the Mid-Atlantic a little bit in the past. That may not be occurring now. That may not occur in 2015, but certainly, you know, the track record says it can happen. So that was why the July 1 was mentioned a year ago, May, I think.
Jim, I saw you had your hand up. Do you still have a comment you'd like to make or a question? All right. Well, we're at the point here where it's at the discretion of the board how they would like to proceed. We do need a motion to move forward, a motion either for regulations in kind or something different. Louis?
I'd make a motion for July 1, opening date of July 1 for the large coastal sharks.
Okay, so we have a motion, we'll get that up, that we're going to have a second from Mr. O'Reilly. And I'll read that as move to open the large coastal sharks fishery on July 1, 2015. Motion by Dr. Daniel and seconded by Mr. O'Reilly. Is that correct, Louis?
Yes, sir.
All right, now I'll turn to you for a comment.
Well, just back to, just echoing what Rob said and the potential, we're closed still. And I know we're going to talk about that, I think, in 6 and 9, the closure off of North Carolina. I believe that's in there. That could give us some more flexibility down the road when North Carolina, Virginia, they have more flexibility and when they can open their fishery. But there is the potential of a lot of quota being caught in June, and I'm glad to hear that it's not that we're looking good right now. But the other option, if we have quota left over, that goes to the resource, and so that's probably not a bad move either. So I would urge everyone to support the July 1 opening for parity, and not be too worried about leaving some of these sharks on the table if that's what happens.
Are there any additional comments about the motion? Seeing none, I'll give a moment to caucus and then we will vote. All right. We have the motion before us to move to open the large coastal sharks fishery on July 1st, 2015. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Go 12. Can you keep your hand up one more time, please? Maryland, thank you. All right, despite some earlier conversation, we're now going to do this with a roll call as a final action. Okay. All right, seeing that from the show of hands that there was not unanimous at the time, we will go ahead and do the roll call vote on this. So I will ask Marin to go ahead and call the roll at this point.
Maine? No Maine? Okay. Massachusetts?
Yes.
Rhode Island?
Abstain.
Connecticut?
Yes.
New York?
Yes.
New Jersey?
Yes.
Delaware?
Yes.
Maryland?
Yes.
Virginia?
Yes.
North Carolina?
Yes.
South Carolina?
Yes.
Georgia?
Yes.
Florida?
Yes.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
Abstain.
National Marine Fisheries Service?
Abstain.
Motion carries 11 yes votes, 3 abstentions. Okay, so that addresses the large coastal sharks. We need to address the non-large coastal sharks. Do I have a motion from the board for the non-large coastal sharks?
So that includes the hammerhead sharks, pelagic sharks, non-blacknose small coastal sharks, and blacknose shark species groups.
Dr. Daniel?
Well, just a concern, maybe Carol can help me out here on the issue with the black nose. I don't want to do something that's going to mess you up too badly, but at the same time, you know, we've lost tremendous opportunity in the small coastal shark fishery because of the black nose coupling. Are we going to talk about that here in a minute too?
So the black-nose, non-black-nose small coastal shark linkage is something that we can only change through an amendment. We are working on Amendment 6, which we hope to have out proposed later this year and final next year in the middle of the year sometime. A lot of the measures in that we're hoping would solve North Carolina's concerns about the black-nose, non-black-nose small coastal linkage. I will have a very quick update on Amendment 6 later when I give my presentation, but I don't have any solution for you right at this moment.
Follow-up, Dr. Daniel?
Not so much a follow-up, just a quandary as to whether, I mean, if we approve the specifications as listed on the board, then we're going to have that same loss again this year. But if I make a motion, then it's going to be completely contrary to the services management approach that would allow us to continue to fish for small coastal sharks, and despite your closure, because most of those fish are occurring in state waters anyway. So I'm reluctant to do that at this time. So I'm not going to make a motion.
Well, I'm not seeing much will of the board here. Can we get any comment from the service about the implications of not moving forward with specifications here today? All right, so what I'm hearing is that without a specific motion by the board, state water fisheries would be constrained by the federal waters measures by default.
Because they're more restrictive measures.
Dr. Daniel?
So I guess this might be a question for Bob. So if that is the case, and a state were to elect not to follow the federal regulations, that would result in a non-compliance finding by this board?
Tony?
For a state water only fishery?
Correct.
Lewis, I'd need to read the plan to see if we qualify to default if state waters did not set measures, because there are portions of the plan that say we default to the state water or to the federal water regulation. So I'd have to read the fine print on the lack of specifications. If you give me 5 minutes, I will get back to you.
That's great. Thank you.
Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's what I recall about the plan development. The whole purpose was to promote consistency among state and federal waters. And so absent specifications, I think that would be a non-compliance.
Bill Adler, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just right off the top. How can a state be out of compliance if we didn't set anything that they had to be compliant about? And if it's in the plan, and I'm not sure that it defaults to the Fed's rule, still, I don't see where, okay, we're going to find you out of compliance if we didn't make a decision. I don't know.
Dr. Daniel?
Yeah, I'm not
We're
threatening.
working at the front here to try to get an answer to that question and make a determination if it's something we can determine in short order or whether a break's going to be required. Go ahead, Dr. Daniel.
Okay, I'm fine. I'll wait.
We'll give staff a moment to see if they can come up with something in short order to answer the questions before us.
The FMP specifies that the Coastal Sharks Board will not actively set quotas, but will follow NOAA fisheries when they close them in federal waters.
So from the advice I'm hearing up here, if we do not set regulations otherwise here today, the specifications that would go into place and the states would be required to follow would be the federal waters specifications, being constrained by their dates of opening and closing or any other subsequent action that was taken in federal waters.
Thank you for that clarification.
And I can read that section to the board. The Coastal Shark Board will not actively set quotas for any species contained in the non-blacknose small coastals, blacknose, aggregated large coastals, hammerhead, or pelagic species groups, but will close the fishery for any species in these groups when NOAA Fisheries closes the fishery in federal waters.
Pretty clear.
The question still before staff here is with regards to differentiating between opening dates and quotas on that matter, so we'll give them another moment. Bill?
So what Tony just said, so does it become a compliance issue in the plan if the state has to go with the feds? And so does the state plan then say, we got to go with the feds and you can be out of compliance? Is that in the wording?
Well, I think it's implicit within the wording. The wording states that the measures to be followed would be the federal waters measures, and if a state fishes outside of those regulations, the board could take compliance actions at that point. Rob?
I suppose more than anything, it's the current closure that really is at issue, at least the way I'm looking at it. And I think Carol had mentioned that the service was in the middle of a process to perhaps make changes. There I'm putting words in the service's mouth, but I'd like to know exactly I'd like to know a little more detail about what's going on there.
Carol?
So a lot is going on in Amendment 6. We are looking at a number of things. We are taking action to set total allowable catches, resetting total allowable catches for non-black-nosed small coastal sharks based on the new assessments we have for sharpnose and bonnethead. We are looking at sub-regional quotas, and we are looking closely at when we do the sub-regional quotas, particularly along the East Coast, what would that mean for the quotas? And some of the things we have found so far, which is part of what Lewis is raising, is that North Carolina North, they don't really catch any blacknose at all, whereas south of that, they catch a mix of blacknose and small coastal. And it's because of that mix and because blacknose is overfished that we have that linkage. So when we close, there are not a lot of discards for blacknose and non-blacknose small coastals. Under Amendment 6, if we do subregionals, there would be different opening and closing dates for those subregions. There are different quotas. There could potentially be different linkages. So that's what we're looking at.
Carol, do you believe it would be helpful to the board to move into your presentation right now while we seek clarification on the issue for specifications?
So most of the presentation is in regard to Amendment 9. I only have a few slides on Amendment 6, so I could do those few slides first, and we could come back to this, and I could answer any questions about Amendment 6 at that time.
That'd be great. Unless there's any objection from the board, we'll review the Amendment 6 slides to help fully answer Rob's question. Seeing no objection, we'll go ahead and review those slides.
All right, so while we move forward to the slide that I'm on, I'll just give you a little bit of the background. This is, Amendment 6 is an action we started a long time ago, back in 2010. We had a ANPR, or an advance notice for proposed rulemaking, where we looked at things like quota stacking, how we would change the permit structure, whether or not we should move forward with catch shares. We had a lot of comments at that point. We actually received a proposal from Gulf of Mexico fishermen to move forward with catch shares. So in 2011, we went out with a notice of intent saying, okay, we are really seriously considering catch shares. Here's all the measures we need to think about if we're moving forward with catch shares. And at that point, most of the shark fishermen looked at us and said, no, we don't want catch shares. We're not sure what this is. we would need to see more details before we decided we wanted to move forward with catch shares. So between that time and now, a lot has happened to the shark fishery. There's been changes in stock status. There's been not all, but a lot of states that have adopted a fin possession ban. So the fishery as a whole has changed tremendously. And so at this point, we have changed Amendment 6 to be more short-term measures that we feel can help stabilize the shark fishery, adjust for some of these issues that keep coming up and that Lewis keeps raising, but other people raise a lot as well. So within Amendment 6, last year we also had the results of 2 stock assessments. So I think she's trying to go to the next slide. Thank you. These stock assessments were for small coastal sharks. They were for the bonnethead and Atlantic sharpnose stock. Both of these species were previously considered one stock across the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico. Both of them were not overfished, with no overfishing. In the 2013 stock assessment, the scientists looked at the data and determined these should really be 2 different stocks. So now we have an Atlantic sharpnose stock, a Gulf of Mexico Atlantic sharpnose stock, an Atlantic bonnethead stock, and a Gulf of Mexico bonnethead stock. For sharpnose, looking at the results, we've determined that for the Atlantic, they are not overfished, with no overfishing occurring, so yay, good news. For bonnethead sharks in the Atlantic, unfortunately, it came out to be an unknown status. Because of the structure we had done the assessment, the scientists were not able to consider Atlantic-only catches, so at this point we really don't know what their status is. So that changes things for small coastals as a whole, because right now we had it split for blacknose, but not necessarily for the others. So we are taking all of that into consideration in Amendment 6. We're looking at the small coastals. How do we set the total allowable catches, now split completely between the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico, and what kind of quotas, commercial quotas, we should set. We're still looking at permit stacking, though we have had a lot of comments that permit stacking is not what we should be looking at. Instead, we should be looking at increasing the commercial shark retention limits. So we are looking at ways to increase commercial shark retention limit and accordingly reduce the shark research fishery quota for sandbar sharks. We are also looking at regional and sub-regional quotas. So right now we have an Atlantic coast quota for the aggregated large coastals and hammerheads. Setting that up, splitting that between subregions. We're currently considering 2 different lines, one which is around northern part of South Carolina and one which is at the southern part of North Carolina. So those would be the subregions, and we're looking at those subregions as well for the small coastals. When we've split them out and looked at the landings, and we've talked about this with our advisory panel. There's a lot of questions. As I mentioned to Rob earlier, we aren't seeing a lot of blacknose at all in the northern area. It comes out to 0.2 metric tons or something like that. So we're actually considering prohibiting blacknose in that northern area. So there would no longer be a linkage. Small coastals in that northern subregion would open and close on its own. And in the southern region, where there is a really good mix of the blacknose and the non-blacknose small coastals, those would continue to be linked and open and close together. We looked at changing retention limits in the Caribbean, which I won't really touch on because that doesn't affect you. Caribbean is currently in the Gulf of Mexico region. And then we're also looking at modifying the upgrading restrictions for the directed shark permit holders so that they could upgrade to different size vessels that are much larger, much safer than what they have now. If they wanted to, they wouldn't have to. And so that's pretty much Amendment 6 and where we are in a nutshell. We are really hoping to have a proposed rule out either by the end of this year or beginning of next year. Really, really pushing for that. And then really pushing for effective next summer, mid-season.
Thank you, Carol. Additional questions? Dr. Daniel.
Just a comment, that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no additional questions or comments, it brings us back to the small coastal shark specifications. Want to give yourselves some time to make that determination?
Well, Tony and I have been reading through the FMP, which is always enjoyable, and it's not crystal clear. There's a little bit of internal conflict between the quota setting, the specification setting sections where it talks about quotas, and the section 4.3.5 where it talks about seasons. In the specifications quota setting section, it clearly says that the states will follow the federal openings and closures. When the federal government closes, the states will close, and the states will not open, or the states will only open when the federal government reopens a fishery. So that part locks us in. Under the season section, it does say that the board is able to set seasonal periods, but I think what that means is if there's a federal opening, we can subdivide that quota available during that opening to try to spread it out or have the fishing occur differently within that quota period. But the quota section is very clear that the states open and close when the federal government does. So that leads me to believe that the intent is for the state fisheries not to be open when the federal government or the federal waters fisheries are not open. Does that make sense?
Dr. Daniel?
With that explanation and recognizing that we are moving in a good direction on this, I would move to concur with the opening dates for the hammerheads, pelagics, and small coastals. I lost it when you went away.
I think we've got something that'll help you here.
There you go.
So your motion, Dr. Daniel, is to move to open other coastal shark groups, including small coastal sharks, hammerhead, pelagic, blacknose, consistent with NOAA fisheries?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Would you like to add for the 2015 year?
Please.
Okay, with that addition, we have a second from Malcolm Rhodes. Any discussion on the motion? Do you need that read again, Joe, or are you good? Okay, so the board has before us move to open other coastal shark groups, including small coastal sharks, hammerhead, pelagic, and blacknose, consistent with NOAA fisheries for the 2015 season. Motion by Dr. Daniel, seconded by Dr. Rhodes. Give the board a moment to caucus before we vote on that. Okay, before proceeding with a roll call vote on this, I will ask, is there any objection to the motion? Seeing no objection, the motion is approved. All right, everybody up here seems to be on board with pushing through with the Amendment 9 presentation. So again, I'll turn to Carol for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. I will try to make this quick so you can all go to lunch. If I'm going too quick, slow me down. If I'm going too slowly, just feel free to motion to speed it up. So thank you again for having me. In the back is also Stephen Durkee. He is working with me, so if you have any questions that aren't answered through this, feel free to contact one of us, and we will gladly answer them. Amendment 9 proposes 5 different things, which I will go forward and discuss. Most of the measures in Amendment 9 have to do with smoothhound sharks. There are at least 3 species of smoothhound sharks in U.S. waters. Those are smooth dogfish, Florida smoothhound, and Gulf smoothhound. These are Mustellus. They are not related at all scientifically to spiny dogfish, so please do not confuse smooth dogfish with spiny dogfish. Almost all of the measures affect the smoothhound fishery. There are 2 exceptions. One is for the Shark Conservation Act. That deals only with smooth dogfish. There are also a lot of, or 2 different measures that we propose that affect all of our gillnet fisheries. So not just the smoothhound fishermen, but all of our shark gillnet fishermen. At this time, we are working through SEDAR to complete a smoothhound stock assessment. In the Atlantic, the scientists have determined that the smoothhound stock assessment would only look at smooth dogfish. They felt fairly confident that Florida smoothhound and Gulf smoothhound were not found in the Atlantic. But it is good for you to remember that these species are out there because it does affect one of the Shark Conservation Act proposed measures. The final assessment should be done in March of next year. So in Amendment 9, the first thing it does is it establishes an effective date for the Amendment 3 and the 2011 trawl rule measures. These measures were ones that would bring smoothhound fishery into federal management, so they establish permit requirements for dealers, they establish reporting requirements, they establish a quota. Pretty much everything you expect for federal management is what these 2 rules would do. One of the things Amendment 3 did that we are proposing to change in Amendment 9 is the quota. If you look at this graph, up along the y-axis, you have the landings. Along the x, you have the year. The blue line is the landings over time. Pretty much right when we implemented or finalized Amendment 3, we never actually implemented the smoothhound measures, we had a huge spike in landings. So the quota that we finalized in Amendment 3, which is the alternative B1, obviously was not going to work. We had a lot of concerns coming from fishermen and this body. Lewis, I remember all of your concerns on this, saying we're going to be closing the fishery as soon as we open it under that quota. So we are re-looking at the quota. Alternative B2 is something that came from this board. It is looking at a rolling quota, maximizing it, adding 2 standard deviations. Alternative B3 is what we are proposing. It is a static quota based on the last 10 years of data. We also looked at another alternative, which is not up on the slide, but is very much under consideration, and that is to take the quota from what comes out of the stock assessment. Couldn't put it on the slide because we don't have a quota from the stock assessment yet. We are hearing from pretty much everybody that they want that quota. Whatever it is, they want the quota from the stock assessment. They don't want us to move forward with what we proposed. Shark Conservation Act. This is something this body has discussed a lot, has requested from us to move forward on a lot. For regular purposes, it requires fins naturally attached to all sharks, but there is this exception for smooth dogfish. We took a look at this paragraph and we found 5 phrases that we felt we really needed to interpret before implementing. The first phrase is an individual engaged in commercial fishing for smooth dogfish. So it's that really those words, engaged in commercial fishing for smooth dogfish. We thought, does this mean somebody who's landing a bunch of monkfish and just happens to catch a smooth dogfish? Can they remove the fins from that one smooth dogfish? Or does this mean somebody who is out there fishing for smooth dogfish and catching pretty much only smooth dogfish? Are they going to be allowed to remove the fins from the smooth dogfish? We looked at 4 alternatives ranging from it doesn't matter what the catch composition is to 100% smooth dogfish. You can only remove the fins if it's all smooth dogfish. We are proposing a 75% catch composition. Another part of this measure is that there would be no other sharks on board, that this would apply only to non-sharks and smooth dogfish. The second phrase is an individual holds a valid state commercial fishing license. We looked at 2 alternatives for this. The first one being a general state commercial fishing license that happens to allow for smooth dogfish to be taken. A second variation is a smooth dogfish specific state commercial fishing license, and we are really looking for comments, particularly from this board, on whether or not that is what that phrase means. Third phrase is the word state. The act is very specific. It defines the state to be Maine through Florida. Problem is Florida has an eastern part and a western part, so we looked at 2 alternatives here. That hatched line going along the coast, it goes out to 50 nautical miles, which is part of the act. And we looked at the alternative where it continues along the west coast of Florida and one where it cuts off along the Atlantic region for sharks. We are proposing keeping it along the Atlantic region, and this is because of the species identification area in the Gulf. There are those 3 species. They are very difficult to tell apart. Even the scientists can't always agree on it without genetic testing. And we are concerned that fishermen could be catching sharks, finning them illegally, or not finning them, but removing the fins from something they think is a smooth dogfish, and it turns out to be a Florida smoothhound. The other 2 phrases we decided to take at face value. That's the 50 nautical miles and the 12% that this board has already discussed and finalized. So in sum, if you want to, under this proposed rule, remove the fins from smooth dogfish, you need to have at least 75% of smooth dogfish on board your vessel, no other sharks on board. You need to be within 50 nautical miles of the eastern shore from Maine through Florida. You need to have a carcass weight of fins that does not exceed 12%. Sorry, the fins cannot exceed 12% of the carcass weight on board. I think that's it. So really quickly through the next 3 measures, because we're adding smoothhounds into federal management, we needed to do a biological opinion that had 1 measure that we felt needed regulatory action, and that was net checks at least 2 hours or a 24-hour limit on soak time. Currently, anyone with a shark permit has to follow the net checks. We looked at a number of different alternatives and preferred the alternative that would really be on how they fish the gillnet. So if they are using a sink gillnet, they are limited to a 24-hour soak time. If they're using a drift gillnet, they need to do a net check and check for marine mammals and sea turtles and remove them every 2 hours. The last measure that we did in Amendment 9 or proposed has to do with the gillnet requirement for sharks. Currently, everybody with a shark gillnet from November through April must have VMS up and working. We are proposing to change that so it would only be off that small area off of Florida, consistent with the Atlantic large whale take reduction team. The comment period for Amendment 9 ends November 14th. There are plenty of ways to submit comments. And that's all I have on Amendment 9. The only other thing I wanted to touch on is some people have asked about Amendment 5B. This is the amendment regarding dusky sharks. We are still actively working on that amendment. I don't have a time frame for you. I just wanted to make sure you knew that we were still working on that. And that's it, if anyone has any questions.
Great, thank you, Carol. Questions from the board? Okay, Dr. Daniel.
I was trying to give somebody else a chance. Very good report. And we'll submit comments on this, but just smooth dogs are very ubiquitous in the small coastal fishery, small coastal shark fishery, and that's going to create a real problem. The 75% is better than 100%, but there's going to be a lot of problems with going with the 75%. And if you don't have the 75%, trying to get rid of all that processing, awful. So trying to get that, you're going to have to take that back offshore. They're going to have to do something with that. That's going to be an increased expense for the industry to try to do away, because it can't go to the landfill. So that's going to create a problem. And I just don't understand if the quota is open for small coastals, why they wouldn't be allowed to land small coastals with their smooth dogs, because that will happen. And so my biggest fear is that they're going to have to discard, not release, but discard the small coastal sharks in that fishery, because they will catch them. And that's just going to be another discard component that we can't really quantify.
Carol?
Thank you. So we have heard that comment a lot. We have heard it from North Carolina that they're concerned particularly with the sharp nose. And we have heard mostly from New Jersey fishermen, although there have been a couple North Carolina fishermen, about thresher sharks, that they would like the opportunity to keep thresher sharks when they are fishing for smooth dogfish. So it is something we're hearing, and we are taking a look at all those comments.
Louis, I had heard you say we will submit comments. I'm assuming you were referring to your own state with that particular comment, but were you requesting, or is there the will of the board to submit comments as a whole here? And if so, we would need some direction on that, or if the individual states are satisfied with going back and crafting their individual comments, they could do that. Did you want to make any other comment on that, Louis?
Well, our issues are so complex that it would take me a long time to go through them all, what I would want in a letter. So I think if there's a specific issue that the board wants to discuss, then that would be great. They have moved forward with the 12%. That's good. It's just the amount of fish. I think it would, the South Atlantic proposed in their letter to NIMS that does not allow, they did not agree with not allowing any other species of sharks. I think that's what their support was. Carol can correct me if I'm wrong. The council supports alternative A2-1A. This alternative allows for smooth dogfish to make up any portion of the retained catch, but it does not allow you to keep sharks. That's their position. I think they should be allowed to keep at least the small coastal sharks that have been identified, which is the sharp-nosed shark and the thresher shark. And if the board is interested in making those comments, I know a lot of folks don't know a whole lot about this fishery, so I'm hesitant to ask for the board to endorse a letter unless others feel comfortable with it.
Is there any other board comment on the Amendment 9 presentation? All right, seeing none, then we will allow, we won't go ahead with any specific comment letter here today, and would encourage the individual states to make comments as appropriate. Okay, thank you very much, Carol. Our final order of business on the agenda today is to elect a vice chair. Do we have a nomination? Mr. Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to nominate Dr. Louis Daniel for vice chairman of the board.
Well, given Dr. Daniel's interest in this species, do we have a second for that? Mr. Boyles? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd make the motion that we close the floor to nominations and cast a single vote for Dr. Daniel as vice chair.
Great. That motion is so accepted and without objection. Seeing none, Dr. Daniel, congratulations as vice chair of the Coastal Shark Board. Is there any other business to come before this board today? Okay, seeing none, this board stands adjourned.
The lunch is served in the room where we had the Heart Luncheon, so you can go over there, grab lunch. You can either bring it back here or eat in there. We'll probably break 15 or 20 minutes or so, eat it pretty quickly, and get back and do spiny dogfish.